Welcome back to Ask the Trade Pros, the show where a couple of trade guys talk about trade stuff. We are here to answer your questions about HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and any other home system so that you can keep your home running smoothly. My name is Jordan.
And I'm Todd.
Lately, the temperature has been dropping, which means it's time to fire up the heater. And no, that burnt dust smell isn't something to worry about. Here in Tucson, we obviously think a lot more about air conditioning most of the year, but knowing what your options are for home heating is also important to keep you comfortable throughout this thing we call winter.
So today, let's go over the different types of heating systems and how to figure out what's going to be best in your home. Jordan, what's your favorite? Mine is the good old fireplace.
Wood fireplaces, yes. I mean, obviously they're a fire hazard and your insurance company doesn't want you to burn the place down and you never get them started, but they smell better than the gas one.
Yeah, I prefer mesquite wood with sitting on the couch just staring at the fireplace, watching the flames.
Yeah, and then half the time your flue closes and you smoke the house out and everyone's choking and your eyes burn. It's a wonderful time.
That's when it's time to grill. All right, now let's be serious. So, most common types of heating systems in the home. We'll talk a little bit about how they work, benefits, and what you may or may not want for your home. So, I guess the most popular is probably going to be the gas furnace, right? Natural gas or propane, depending on what you have in your area.
Well, out here, in Tucson, we use mostly centralized heat, the majority of the heat, and then gas furnaces, Propane in the outskirts, propane ones are natural gas. But that's a furnace that's designed that's been around for 100 years.
Yeah, and then we have heat pump, which obviously if you don't have any propane or natural gas to your home or area, then your only option is electric, which is the heat pump, which utilizes the refrigerant and heat strips for your heating.
There's a couple other niche kind of heaters that we see out here. We have some hydronic heaters. They're more common in the Midwest or back east, but we do have some hydronic heaters out here.
That's true.
We have a few of the older homes have a radiant wall heater, which is an old style of heater. Not very efficient, not very effective, but we have a few of those out here as well.
My favorite, and people might dislike me for this, but I'm a big fan of natural gas. I would much prefer natural gas than all electric.
Well, yeah, natural gas is it's a very effective heating. There's a reason we've been making it for years. It's a very simple machine in that there's not a lot to break down on them. They're very straightforward in how they work. Just pollute a little bit sometimes. But there's ways to alleviate that too by a more efficient gas heater. Well, let's slow this up a little bit and take it back to basics. Most people know this, but what does a heater do? It essentially has a hot surface, whether that's this coil you're talking about. When we get to heat pumps, we'll talk about the coil. In a furnace, it's called what they call a heat exchanger. It's an area that gets hot. And then there's some sort of device that blows air over that part and then blows the heat into your house. The question we're talking about when we talk about all these different types essentially is what causes that hot section to get hot. In this case, hydronic, it's water. Gas furnace, it's going to be gas burning. Heat pump, it's going to be an air conditioner doing it.
So first we'll talk about the hydronic heating system. Hydronic heating system utilizes hot water for the heat, hence the name hydronic. What that does is it takes hot water from your hot water heater and pushes it through a coil, a bunch of tubes going into your air handler, and it's going to circulate that hot water through there, which in turn your blower blows air over that, putting warm air into your house. Once that reaches temperature, it then shuts off and operates just like any forced air system. I don't like the hydronic personally because you never really see a high temperature coming out of the vents. Now, Jordan may say differently about this, but typically I only see 100 and 104 max coming out of any hydronic system, and it never really warms up the way that I would prefer something to warm up.
What is a gas furnace heat output at?
Normally, you can expect a gas furnace to have a supply vent temp of anywhere, let's just say from 115. Typically, you don't want it to go over mid 120s, but it's, again, I don't know if we're going to get into it in this episode, but it's all about something called temperature rise. So you want to keep your temperature rise within a certain area as well. However, I would say a gas-fired system, somewhere between between 115 and 125.
Now, these temperatures, there's a difference in comfort level for these temperatures. So I'm with Todd here. I'm not a fan of the hydronics, at least in Tucson. And most of my dislike for the hydronics has to do with the reliability of them. They have a lot of variable parts. You have to have a water heater involved. You have to have certain mechanisms, motors, connections,
Check valves, motorized valves,
water purification, other things that just cause this thing to fail more than you wanted to. But as comfort goes, that lower discharge temperature is more comfortable to most customers. It's a softer heat. It's like slow cooking versus cooking on high. It takes a little bit longer for the house to warm up, but it warms up in a more even temperature. And a lot of customers say it warms up in a less dry temperature. So when you raise the temperature with a gas furnace fairly quickly, you dry out the air in the house. So heat pumps are kind of a middle ground between the gas furnace and the hydronic. They have a softer heat temperature than a gas furnace does, and they're more reliable than the hydronic. But like Todd said, historically, they have more parts. They do more wear. They are historically about 50% less reliable than a standard air conditioner. But that's getting better with each generation, too. They're starting to work on that, and it gets more reliable systems as they come out.
Yeah, and if you have solar panels on your house, the heat pump may be the option for you, depending on energy usage and consumption. As we all know, natural gas is fairly inexpensive.
And modern heat pumps are getting even more efficient than the previous ones because you can get variable speeds, 2 stages, multi-stage systems that you couldn't get before. They also are getting far better at pulling heat out of lower temperatures, which used to be a drawback to the heat pump, that when it dropped below freezing, you couldn't get very good heat out of it. Some of the modern variable inverted systems can pull heat down to -5, -10, which, here in Tucson has never happened.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jordan, because I guess we missed a very important heating source. Talking about heating sources, mini split utilizes heat pump, but as Jordan mentioned, that's one of those systems that can pull heat out of the air down into negative temperatures.
Yeah, I spent some time in Banff, Canada, which those of you are lucky enough to go. It's just outside of Calgary, and I was being my brilliant self going there in February when it was -7 out. But the mini splits there, they have mini splits actually specially made that will pull heat out of the air down to -40.
Wow. So again, heat pump may be the solution. We know that's where the country is moving to, all electric, right? Who knows how much longer we'll have natural gas.
The problem with natural gas is not the efficiency of the heat. It's natural gas requires a venting, which is one of the things very important to check when you turn your heat on, is that your flue gases vent properly from your house. They're toxic. They can kill you in the middle of the sleeping. So that's one thing you have to worry about with a gas furnace that you do not have to worry about with a heat pump. It does not have that issue. The modern multi-stage furnaces are more efficient. They burn the gas better. They burn it pure. They have less discharge of toxic chemicals than older furnaces do, but they still have some sort of gas that's released from them. One of the things we don't see out here in Tucson, I know it's more common in the Midwest, is radiant heat, as in radiant floors, heated floors, where you just heat the whole room up and it just radiates from the floor. We don't see that out here as much because we don't really need that much heat, so it's a very expensive system to put in. It's a very nice heat. It comes off the floor because every room is just heated from the ground up, and heat rises, as you all know. So if your floor gets warm and then it rises all the way to the roof, you have a very nice, even heat around the room. But it's a very expensive system to install, so we usually only see it out here in custom homes.
Okay, so when you're thinking about what home heating system is best for you, there are some things you should keep in mind. Let's talk about a few of those things, Jordan. I guess A is, what type of heating system do you currently have? Is it gas? Is it a heat pump? Sometimes switching from one to the other could be more costly and a lot of modifications. Now that everyone's starting to get solar panels, a lot of people are wanting to get rid of their gas system.
Well,
and go to a
absolutely.
heat pump.
It could be very expensive. So you have to decide. We get this a lot where people say, hey, I want to go to a heat pump. I see the tax credits. Things are going on. Let's do a heat pump. But it requires different wiring a lot of times, or it requires a new electrical circuit or things of that nature. And you have to weigh your cost savings. A couple $1,000s to upgrade it to handle some of the electrical versus how much you save in tax credits or the heat pump itself.
And that's a good point with the going from gas to a heat pump. And just FYI is your gas furnace typically runs off of, only runs off of a 120 volt circuit, a normal outlet in your home. If you go to the heat pump, your air handler is more than likely going to be 240 volts. They do make 115 volt heat pumps that you can still utilize that same circuit. However, the only drawback to that is you're not going to have heat strips for those coldest days of the year.
True. Now, one of the best features to come out recently is what they call a dual fuel. Now, it won't step you away from your gas furnace, but it lets you use the heat pump for the majority of your heat load, which is very efficient, very soft heat. And then as the backup, it's still using an existing gas furnace in the same place, and then you don't have to run a new wired circuit. The main drawback to that is it's a slightly more expensive equipment and machine than it is to put in a standard heat pump. So what are some of the other things we want to talk about when we're comparing, say, a heat pump versus a gas furnace?
Well, with the heat pump, a few other things. We've spoke on it earlier about temperatures and comfort levels, whatever's comfort to you. We do get those complaints with gas furnaces that the air is too dry and you're itching. And on the other end of the spectrum, a heat pump is, as Jordan mentioned, some people say a more comfortable heat. However, there are some drawbacks to that as well. There's what's called dirty sock syndrome, which is a smell. Heat pumps tend to get black mold inside the blower housing over time, which a lot of people are unaware of, but there's solutions to that. They have IAQ solutions, indoor air quality. There's LED lights, many other systems on the market to combat that.
Tell me a little bit more about your dirty socks here, Todd.
Well,
what is dirty socks?
My socks don't stink, but theoretically, if they did.
What is your dirty sock syndrome?
So dirty sock syndrome is and I don't know where the name came from. Maybe Jordan knows, but I don't. But it is a real thing. So we're not making stuff up here. It's a smell that your air handler produces, and the exact reason why we get calls on this all the time that they have a weird smell coming from their heat pump, and it's dirty inside. It just produces a smell that literally smells like dirty socks.
Yeah, if you want to get down into the weeds of it, it's a design problem with a heat pump. They don't get as hot as furnaces, and therefore they don't kill all the bacteria and mold that may develop in them. This is why they're prone to mold buildup and mildew buildup. But essentially, dirty sock syndrome happens when you get a mildew buildup in the heat pump, and obviously that causes kind of a swampy, musty, swanky smell and circulates throughout your buildings. We see this a lot in heat pumps that are in older buildings because the ductwork, the air, the materials in the building especially will get in there and cause that. It is an issue. So they're much more efficient. The heat is more comfortable if you don't mind a little odor to go with it. But as Todd said, there's alternative ways to solve that. We can put in UV lights, air purification devices, stuff of that nature that will remove the must, remove the odor, and kill the bacteria inside the heat pump.
So I think this episode may have brought more questions to your mind when choosing what system is best for your home. So
that's why we're here.
If that's the case, or if you have more questions about what heating system is going to be best for your home, I would always recommend reaching out to your local trade pro.
Yeah, absolutely. We can answer a lot of questions. There's a lot of ways we can fine-tune these systems too to work better for your homes and your needs. As always, thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to your podcast.
If you'd like us to cover a home system question or topic, then leave us a voicemail, email us, and we'll talk about it in a future episode. That information is going to be in your show notes.
And as always, this podcast is sponsored by the great folks at Done Right Services. Thank you for your generous support.